Conquer the Noise is a podcast produced by Unconquered, an independent agency challenging brand perspective through redefined content. This podcast is dedicated to telling stories of outstanding ideas and people who have found their way amongst the chatter. Jen, thank you so much for joining us today. You've been with the Nature Conservancy for 11 years and have moved through a couple of different roles. What are you currently doing for them now?
Yeah, so thanks, Jonathan. I actually am leading our cause marketing and brand partnerships work globally for the organization.
Cause marketing is one of those things that I've been paying attention to over the last 4 or 5 years. It's definitely, I've seen a shift and change as it's becoming more, I guess you say, vogue to as businesses align themselves with cause marketing. What kind of shifts are you seeing in your role?
I would say, the biggest shifts that I'm starting to see are those that are very positive. I'm actually seeing some really positive shifts.
That's great.
And detail-wise, it's around companies making true investments and true commitments, kind of behind the curtain, as I always call it, and connecting social impact to not only, what differentiates me among my competitors, what allows me to gain greater access and greater affinity from customers, but what really is helping to ensure my business for the future. And so making those true investments, for instance, if you're Coca-Cola and you're saying, if we run out of water in Mexico, we're not going to be able to bottle our product anymore. And so knowing the real impacts and dependencies that they have on environment and natural resources, and making those investments that are really critical to the future of their business. And then, once making those meaningful commitments and starting to see traction and starting to see things happening and getting data back from those, looking for ways that they can actually be thought leaders in their industries. So almost open source, transparently sharing information, sharing, the things that they're doing and what they're learning, so that others in their industries can learn from those things too. And then I always talk about threading it the whole way through to customers and employees, and how they can educate and engage those audiences to make a difference too. So it's been really cool to see almost a full suite of engagement from companies around social impact that is not just marketing. I really lead on the marketing and brand side, but I've got a lot of really smart experts in my pocket internally at the organization who are steeped in science and conservation. And so we're looking at that kind of sustainability consulting and how to help companies run their businesses better, but also, thread that through to all the audiences in which they're engaging.
Well, I think threading it through, I love that term or idea. A lot of times when we're speaking internally or with our clients, we kind of use words like holistic, sort of an idea of incorporating everything. But when you're saying thread it through, what's your involvement in that? Are you working with like company leaders to establish better like practices from supply chain to what if they use a lot of water, if they're recycling water and so forth, or is it tend to be a little bit more on the, as you were saying, brand marketing side, making sure it's being thread through their communications?
Yeah, both actually. So, the Nature Conservancy, if you think about us, really has this full suite of offerings. So we're able to bring in experts in sustainable agriculture, water, ocean conservation, land use, development, forestry, all these different industries, energy, to come alongside, private sector partners to say, let us help you figure out how to value nature on your balance sheet, how to invest differently with nature in mind. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're coming alongside many of our corporate partners to do that. The role that I play and the role that my team plays is to, once those commitments are made and once those companies are showing a real commitment and a real investment in nature conservation and value of nature, then it's my job to really come in and say, okay, this is what it means for your employees. This is how you can not only just tell the story for the good of telling the story or for the good of influencing industry, but here's also how you can take what could be a very complicated thing, like ecosystem services or biodiversity, these big words that are really not super sexy for those of us who are, out shopping in the grocery store or picking up our favorite outfit. Like, it's my job to make those issues relevant in a way that consumers can understand, can attach, and then can do small things to also create that ripple effect of impact. So if it's talking about carbon offsetting and climate, with Amazon or Microsoft, and we're working with them to look at offsetting their impacts around carbon and climate commitments that were made, in the Paris Agreement. That's great, but does a general consumer really understand that? Do we know what that means? Do I care? What does that mean to me? What it could mean to you is planting a tree in your community, or understanding the value of standing forests, or protecting and creating healthy forests near where you live. And so that's how we thread it through to the consumer, is really using healthy water, clean air, as a way into some of those bigger, hairier issues like climate.
So it sounds like you have, you're an educator in some ways, because you have to work within the organizations, companies itself, educate and process, and then take that and then educate consumers who are then reading those labels, making those decisions to buy things, but doing so in a way that's not overly technical. I would almost argue that consumers now are becoming very technical and becoming more
Absolutely.
aware. Like biodiversity is a sexy word to some people.
Some people it is, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's becoming more important to let people know where you stand with that. When I say you, I mean businesses. But with that, there's a lot of greenwashing that corporations have been doing to maybe make their impact look like it's not as bad as it is, or to help maybe sway the people who do care about those things to make a purchase with them. How are you navigating that and like working with those corporate partners when they come to you? So I'm sure you have to do your own vetting to make sure that they are the appropriate partner for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never worked in a place, I think, in my entire career that has such a succinct way of assessing not only private sector partners, but partners across every avenue of the world, whether it's community leaders or governments. And we have a pretty intense process for vetting our corporate relationships. We do a lot of analysis. We run what we call these rep risk reports. So reputational risk, there's a whole system that gives you like 85 different points that you can look at across a variety of social issues, environmental issues, legal issues, human welfare issues. And so we use that. And then, also it's my job to protect the brand of the organization. I am, one of many brand champions, and it's my job first to protect the integrity of the organization and the brand, and really make sure that there is that direct intersection with our mission. My team laughs at me a lot because I use Venn diagrams. I love visuals, and I do a lot of Venn diagrams. And so I often will look at, the corporate commitments or potential impacts overlaid with the Nature Conservancy's greatest areas of expertise and greatest areas of leverage and impact as associated with, our key strategies. And then the third bucket, looking at what do people care about? Like, what do people out in the real world, as I like to call it, care about? And at that very specific intersection, is where we operate, is where we can capture funding to do the really important things that we need to do. We can kind of twist the arm a bit of the companies who have the greatest impacts and get them to make changes in their business models, in the way they invest, in the way they run their companies, and the place where we can kind of gin up public support, whether it's through advocacy, whether it's through donations, whether it's through behavior change. And in that sweet spot is where I really try to lead the strategy from for my team and for my little part of the Nature Conservancy. And I feel like if we can check all those boxes, or we're moving a company toward checking all of those boxes, because sometimes when I have conversations with companies, I'm like, look, the first step is saying that you want to make a difference and meaning it.
Yeah.
And committing to it and holding yourselves accountable to it and funding it and resourcing it. And when you don't need it, being completely transparent about how and why you didn't need it. And so I think, those are the ways in which we really look strategically at partners that we choose and those that we say no to.
You talked a bit about sort of the human side of that. That was a lot. And it sounds like a complicated process, to be honest, and a lot to consider. And a lot of different data points, and the ability to really interpret and come up with meaningful insights from all that. So stepping back a little bit and speaking to like the human side of it and speaking to the people, and you were saying, really finding what people actually care about, like the in the real world, how are you finding that? Is that through research, or is that through polling? Is that through like social listings from the brands? I'm really curious to how you're getting that sort of insight.
Yeah. So it's a whole lot of different places, and sometimes it's more art than it is science.
Yeah.
We do use social listening tools as an organization, but we also, because we're building these comprehensive and often years and years long, deep relationships with our partners, we get a lot of data from our partners that are showing that helps us to understand, issues that we're testing. Like, we can test, do we get a greater response through XYZ brand when we're talking about trees or when we're talking about water? Or is it, and that helps us also look at like what are key demographics of purchasers and their customers. So that helps us kind of whittle into the areas. But, we also, I work with sustainable brands. I work with, Nielsen often comes out with really great, green reports on issues that customers care about. So it's kind of a cross section of like a lot of research that's public and some that we're getting, from our partners, and then also trends that we just kind of know in our gut. When you've been in this space for as long as I have, and as long as an organization has, you see cyclical things happening. When I started at the Nature Conservancy, I joined as a member of our global climate team, and some of the things that we were really starting to see as a loud drumbeat kind of out in the public are coming back again.
And what is that? Is that the climate? Is it climate change, or what are you seeing specifically?
Yeah, I'll say, right now the drumbeat is so loud for climate and carbon offsetting, and like, what does that look like? What is carbon offsetting? What does it mean? As an organization, we've been investing in blue carbon, which is also like how you can offset through these amazing sinks under the ocean, which
I
fascinating.
haven't heard of that. So,
yeah,
and I would love for you to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Was that a pun? You said dive in. That was good.
I wish my dad jokes were that on point today, but I will take credit for it. Thank you.
Well, no, it's looking at, what's below the ocean and how much more ability there is for carbon capture. Because if you think about it, trees are above ground and they're constantly like capturing and releasing and capturing and releasing. And when you think about what's below the ocean through, the sand and the mangrove roots and all those type of things, that's not going anywhere. Like it's staying there. And so the ability for, carbon capture under the ocean is like this really untapped possibility. And so we're just starting to do some really cool projects and science, globally. And it's pretty interesting. So for me, I'm like, that's the next place for carbon is.
Yeah, I remember spending time in the Keys around the mangroves and learning quite a bit about how important it is for ecosystems. This was years ago, and they did talk about that a bit. Their mangroves, the role in carbon, and also just keeping those ecosystems healthy and alive. But I haven't really seen a whole lot of mangrove systems outside of the Keys.
Yep. There are some really awesome projects, I want to say, that we're working on in Africa.
Okay.
That there's like a whole community that's being built around this notion of blue carbon and what it can bring back to that community and what it can bring back to the economics of that area. And so, I think it's an opportunity for the future, and it's definitely one that our organization is doing much more science and research on.
So when someone comes to you, or an organization, company comes to you, I'm wondering how new this is for them. Are they coming? You say, man, we've heard of cause marketing. What is it? Can you help us with that? Or are they coming to you a little bit more informed? It's such a hot topic now that I imagine there's some level of education already established, but cause marketing is somewhat new, I think, in something that's become more and more of a thing over the last few years. So I'm really curious to if there's a whole level of education around what cause marketing is.
Yeah, I think we're in this interesting transition between corporate philanthropy and cause marketing, and I think a lot of companies believe that their philanthropic contributions should bring with them a return benefit, which is storytelling and asset capture, and us as the Nature Conservancy kind of singing from the mountaintop about how wonderful they are. And if you look at, my legal colleagues would be super excited that I'm going to say this. But if you look at, what the definition of philanthropy is, it's giving without expected return. And so we're in a really interesting place where, companies aren't just giving to give anymore. Like nobody's doing anything anymore unless it's got some kind of ROI for them. Whether it's my business is going to boom from it, or I'm going to have the resources I need, or my customers are going to feel, all warm and fuzzy about it, or my employees are going to dig it. Like we're not just doing anything for the good of the world. We're doing it all because, yes, we care, and there's a lot of commitment to the good of the world, but business does make the world go round. And if we don't have economies and we don't have ways to fund things, like the world will slow down. And so I think there's that interesting intersection between what used to be seen as philanthropy and now is kind of dribbling into cause marketing. And so we spend a lot of time educating companies on, look, we're a 501c3. We are not your PR arm. And so, if you're giving just to give, that is amazing. You're advancing science. We can help you storytell. We can help you be factual about the work that we're doing together. But if you want us actively promoting, if you want us helping to engage customers, if you want us helping to educate and change behaviors, there's a value in our brand. There's a value in our marketing engine. There's a value in all the assets that we have that we bring to the table, and you want them. And so there has to be an investment in those things too.
Well, I mean, that's like a double-edged sword. It's good and bad. Good because people are making the investment because they do think it's going to have a return for them financially. So they are making those efforts, but it's kind of like a little disappointing that it's for the bottom line. And that, not maybe that's just the idealist in me speaking, that there aren't other motivators, but I still think it's a great way to champion change, positive change, and
Absolutely.
a great digestible like vehicle for that. Because I think the hardest part for brands, as you said, it's like, what am I going to get out of it? And now if you can actually show that there's benefit outside of positive environmental and change in community, there's more likely to be accepted. But with that, I'm wondering what kind of like measurements or accountability are brands holding to that? Are they saying, if we're investing this much to do this, we expect to see this? Are they saying these things, or are you seeing this sort of expectation?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll just say to kind of backtrack to your last comment, I'm an idealist too, and I think at the heart of it, every one of the partners that we work with and the people on their staff genuinely do want to make the world a better place. They do. But they know that their jobs are to produce granola bars or cars or energy or whatever it is. And if they can do those things that are their jobs while also, building economies for local communities or, helping to improve the future of the planet, they want to do that. There is a win-win there. And so, they're not all just doing it for like the almighty dollar, but at the end of the day, because we're marketers, right? And we're communications people, and you have to know your audience. And so, when I go to talk with a company, I know that it has to benefit the business in some way, shape, or form. I have to be able to present our work and present a partnership in a way that elevates XYZ components of the business. It can't just be for the good of the world. So if we do all the things right, then the world wins. And so I just share that. As far as metrics, and accountability, I think, for the most part, we are sharing back, we're collecting whatever metrics we can through campaign tags and through digital and social traffic and, all that kind of stuff. We like to do that because it does show that additional kind of benefit back to the companies of our brand and of our audiences and our supporters. But in addition to that, the companies they're sharing with us the data and the metrics that they're picking up. So I can't say that we have found any of our campaigns that we've run with our partners to not be successful. They're getting lifts because their customers care about it, and they've done enough analytics out ahead to know that's why we're working together.
Yeah, it's definitely this convergence between purpose and business that's outside of the traditional realm of the idea of like what a business is, the sole purpose of a business, in profit generation, be it being profit generation and obviously supporting the families and workers and people who work there and those communities. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting time where we're starting to see these things merge up again with each other. I think I'm really curious to how these brands are like navigating purpose, how they're finding that. Like what's the is there an epiphany? Is because they're listening to their customers, and this is what they're hearing from them, or is it coming from, higher up where, you know, flat out Americans believe in the power of brands, and there's been a shift in responsibility, I think, from looking at government to looking at the brands you support to take a role and a lead in that. And I'm really fascinated by that whole sort of shift and change and how that's coming about. I think it's a really fascinating time. Some of the work you've been doing, it varies across various different sectors. Is there one with inside TNC that you are particularly passionate about? Is it like clean water or carbon or any of the ones that you're currently working on?
For me personally, I'm personally passionate about, it just kind of leads nicely after what you just said. I am personally passionate about the intersection of people and nature.
Mm-hmm.
Really looking at how nature can provide so many solutions to some of the biggest challenges we're facing, like can buffer storms during hurricanes. The whole, when New York City's downtown was like flooding because of the big hurricane a few years ago, like mangroves can help with that. Oyster reefs out in the Hudson can help with that. Like dropping old oyster shells and letting living oysters come and like attach to them to create these organic oyster reefs, slow wave energy that help people, that protect people. How environments like in Latin America and some of our work around sustainable agriculture, like how keeping forests standing are actually making people more money and protecting critical biodiversity and also these really beautiful places. So it's just that intersection to me is really fascinating. And also, the intersection of that, like I was saying before, in cities, nature and health, especially now that we have all been in a time of COVID when we are doing this podcast. I think people are much more aware of what nature can do in their lives. How it can give you a place to take a breath and de-stress, how our food comes from nature, how it's a place for us to connect with people that we love. So I really do think that intersection of people and nature is really what's most passionate for me. And it can happen all in many different environments.
Has COVID changed the corporate outlook, or I would say outlook, but interest as far as what they're looking to support from you? I don't know if that's really making sense from saying that the way I'm trying to, yeah. But I'm really curious to how the pandemic if it has shifted any sort of emphasis from environmental support to other things, and if you are seeing that on your end.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. What I can say is this year has been one of our busiest years ever on the front of private sector engagement. That has not slowed down. So while I do think there probably is a lot of diversification of contributions, going to healthcare workers and, vaccine development science and all that type of thing. I don't really feel like we're seeing a whole lot of diversion. I think we're seeing more investment, actually.
That's great.
So definitely.
Yeah, I spent some time on the TNC site. There's a lot of great information. And I think one of the criticisms of nonprofits is that they waste money, frankly, that they're bloated or they're not using the money appropriately. But it's the statistic that I read from the site, 71% of your funding goes directly towards like science-driven program work. I thought that was really pretty incredible number. And after looking through the site, saw the number of reports that you are producing, and I can see where it's going. So you can kind of you can see where the money's going, and notice that water seems to be a big issue in these last couple of reports, or of concern for people.
Yep.
Now, it's interesting. Like I've lived in New Mexico, I've lived in parts of Mexico, I've lived in California, all drought-ridden areas where we had to, we were literally, reusing water to water plants that, we did the dishes in. If you have like special soaps, doesn't kill the plants and all that, it's very,
wow.
very different, very, affects your lifestyle, makes you really put things in perspective. But what are you seeing on your end as far as water concerns? Is it access the healthy and clean water, or is it more becoming like a water rights issue?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, we talk often internally and with our partners about quality and quantity. I think the quantity challenge is even more prevalent in the U.S., which is interesting. When you looked at some of those reports, I'm guessing you maybe looked at our urban water blueprint and some others that looked at like hundreds of cities all around the globe. And the one thing that I always reference is the awareness of people generally in the United States that you could turn your tap on and no water would come out is just unthinkable. And so your experience is new for me to hear, because most of the people, that we talk to, that we interview, we did a man and woman on the street thing, talking to them about understanding where their water comes from. And people are like, the pipes, the tap, like they don't realize that it could come from, for the West, Colorado River, which supports almost half the states out that away. And how much we get from the Anacostia and the Potomac here in the DC area. And the Anacostia has really struggled, in past years with clean water. And that's where we access water from for this area too. So I think just building that awareness of understanding that water comes, it is coming from nature. Trees having trees along those waterways helps to keep it cleaner, helps to keep it flowing. So I think for us, it's more of a quantity issue in the US, and then in some international markets, quantity and quality. A lot in California, a lot about rights, usage. You've got a lot of companies, big agriculture, pulling from water sources that are also pulling for local communities. And when that water runs out, who should pay for that? Who should reinvest in that? And so TNC actually has a really innovative concept that we now have cycled globally called water funds. And it's all about having the water users, whether it's community, government, private sector, actually investing in those water sources to make sure the water keeps running as much as everybody needs it. And we're seeing a big pickup in that model in the US. It really got its roots in Latin America, and we've got dozens of water funds all around the country and the globe, where we've got private sector, paying into help make sure that nature and all the ecosystems around these water sources are healthy and invested in.
Well, honestly, I think there should be in some ways, especially if you're a business that uses a lot of water or is bottling it and selling it or whatever. There should definitely be some sort of investment back into it. But I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. I would love to hear, since you've been there 11 years, so you have a lot of experience working with teams, managing teams, and culture. And it sounds like there's a very strong culture at TNC. So I'm curious to how you lead sort of a purpose-driven team, get everyone, on the same page. As we were talking earlier, it sounds like a very complex checks and balances that you go through. So how do you lead something like that?
Yeah, it's communicate early and often. I always tell my team and anybody that works with my team, because we're a cross-functional little shop, we do a lot of work with our legal teams and digital and creative and, content. And so I talk about us as being a mini ad agency or a mini PR agency. Mm-hmm. We do everything kind of from soup to nuts, from contracts the whole way to, negotiation and execution. So mm-hmm. we've got to be talking early and often, trying as much as I can to let people run. I feel like I'm more of like a player coach type of manager. I don't mind licking envelopes, mm-hmm. If envelopes need to be licked. And, I don't mind having the tough conversations when I have to be bad cop to get my team what they need to be successful. So yeah. I think you got to lead by example, and my whole background of my life has been in sports. And I think I learned a whole lot from, playing college basketball and playing sports growing up. Like it really is a team environment for me. Mm-hmm. And that's how I try to lead. I think sometimes too, at least for myself, have in, my past lives come to the office thinking that, this is like office me and everybody's got to put on like their office person. Totally. And you forget that everyone's a human and you've got like a sick kid at home or, a parent that you're managing or a dog, which I'm surprised mine hasn't howled yet. So, if we look at each other as human beings first, and it's like he heard you, and try to be empathetic. I think that's another thing, is just trying to understand that like people have lives and work is very important. But give the flexibility to work around your life.
Well, I think that's the crazy thing about COVID is that has, I think, allowed that humanity to come through, because as we are talking here, I'm looking in your home. I have a private view into your home. And so you're literally having people that you would probably never have in your home, present, seeing your family, seeing your kids, seeing your pets. I think it definitely has like helped humanize our teams and work culture. For me, I've always been self-employed, so I haven't necessarily had the experience of going into an office every day. So this is definitely, hasn't been necessarily a new thing for us doing the remote work, where it has, I think, for a lot of organizations, it's finally catching on, and I think for good reason. But how are you keeping like your team spirits high, during this time, and keeping people like feeling like they're connected? Because again, we were once going into an office, now we're not. People are getting fatigued with the video calls all the time. So I'm really curious to how you're navigating that.
Yeah. So, we have a standing team meeting every Tuesday morning, which we usually do. We always try to do some kind of silly, funny icebreaker that I have nothing to do with. So like everybody brings their own thing. And, we're doing a virtual holiday thing this year. I found this really cool virtual chocolate tasting. So everybody's getting their own shipment of little chocolates that we're going to sit together and do. Cool little company out of Massachusetts, TAZA. So I'll just give them a shout out because they've been wonderful to work with. Like weird gift Wednesdays, like, there's so many funny things that you could post in Slack. So we do that a lot. We're doing like some cooking demos. My team also oversees our celebrity engagement program. And so we're working with some chefs and managed to get them to set up some free demos for us to cook some things with them and try some cool things out.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and we instated no meeting Fridays a couple weeks ago. I just told my team, I was like, look, I know we have external clients. So if we need to meet, with our company partners, let's do that on Fridays. But
I want to steal that.
Like, tell everybody else no.
Yeah, I'm going to steal that and try and make that a company-wide thing. I love that idea.
Yeah.
So this is what I loved about having you on the show is we actually never really get a chance to talk with beneficiaries of 1% for the planet. We usually have people on who are part of the program and donate. So it's a great chance to hear from the other side and hear the real impact. How has 1% for the planet, your relationship with them, benefited TNC?
Yeah, so I think we're one of the earlier sign-on organizations of 1% for the planet. So we've not only kind of the global umbrella Nature Conservancy, but many of our local state chapters in the US in particular have their own like little 1% for the planet campaigns and accounts so that, they can drive local business activation and local business donations to the work that they're doing. So I know our Colorado chapter in particular has been really engaged and involved over the years. They've been one who's just really been like running with the opportunity. So, it allows us to do more of, the good work that we're here to do. And it's big planet. So, it's interesting. I had a weird crossover with some of the folks from 1% for the Planet on another call a couple weeks ago. And they said the same thing. They were like, we don't often get to like really talk to all the beneficiaries and kind of hear what's happening. So, but yeah, it's been a long-standing partnership. I wish I knew off the top of my head how much we've received, and I just don't. But yeah, it just every bit of contribution, every bit of visibility, every bit of support inches us, more in a positive direction. So.
Well, as we wrap here, I would love it if you could direct our listeners to where they can make a donation or where their business can make a donation now that end of year is approaching. We were talking earlier about before our official podcast start about how everyone makes those end of year donations. Where can people do that?
Yeah, so you can just go to nature.org and look for the donate button. I also think we have a special pop-up right now for year end. So that would be awesome.
And I saw you also have a planting tree donation.
We do. So if you're interested in gifting a tree to somebody who is a 1 in a billion for you, you can go to plantabillion.org and you can actually gift a tree. Your giftee will get a little digital card that you can write a message in and tell them how much you mean to them. And if you are a partner of ours, maybe getting a tree planted in your honor. So not to spoil it, but it's also a really good thing to gift to partners or colleagues too.
I love that. Well, thank you, Jen, so much for joining us today and sharing all your insight. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was so great to be here.
If you have any questions, comments, or want to be on the show, please email me personally at j@weareunconquered.co.